I had just settled into the kind of Monday morning that usually started with a lukewarm cup of coffee and a stack of spreadsheets when my phone buzzed. I reached for it absent-mindedly, half expecting another client email or a calendar reminder about a Zoom call. Instead, it was a forwarded email from my cousin Lila. The subject line read, "Manning Family Beach Week 2025, RSVP now." I froze. My stomach tightened. I hadn't seen that subject line in years, and for good reason. I opened it with the hesitant curiosity of someone peeking into an old wound. It was all there. The dates, the plans, the obnoxious reminders about matching family t-shirts and bonfire marshmallow roasts. The whole damn clan was CC'd from Aunt Rhonda, who still insisted on being called Auntie R, like she was a 90s pop star, to my cousin Jake, the family's golden boy turned semi-professional poker player. Everyone was on that list except for me. No mention of me. No casual, "Hey, hope you can make it this year." Addie, no typo of my name wedged awkwardly between second cousins, twice removed. Just a digital void where my name should have been. Lila's note above the forwarded message was brief but piercing. "Saw this and thought of you. Don't let them erase you again." I gripped my coffee mug, the ceramic warm against my suddenly cold hands. The Manning Family Beach Week had always been a big deal. The kind of overblown, sunburnt tradition my parents clung to like a lifeline. I had so many memories from those trips: sand-covered feet, the sound of the ocean at night, my uncle's ridiculous attempts at grilling without lighting half his shirt on fire. But as the years went by, my presence had become more of an inconvenience than a tradition. The last time I attended, I was 18, freshly accepted into a prestigious university, and full of the kind of naive hope that made me believe family bonds were unbreakable. That week had ended with a family photo where I was conveniently cropped out before it was posted online. It just looked better that way. My sister May had said when I confronted her, her tone so dismissive it felt like a slap. That was 12 years ago. I let the email linger on my screen for a moment longer before closing it. I could feel that familiar mixture of anger and hurt bubbling up, but I forced it back down. They weren't worth my tears, not anymore. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from my friend Kara. "Saw the family invite you okay?" I took a deep breath and typed back, "Yeah, just fine, I'm over it." But I wasn't. Not really. And as I stared at the blank, impersonal message, they hadn't even bothered to include me on something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage exactly, more like a cold, calculated resolve. I might have been excluded from their guest list, but I wasn't about to be erased. I opened my laptop, my fingers moving before my mind fully caught up. I knew that beach house, knew it like the back of my hand. Every sun-bleached corner, every creaky floorboard, every driftwood railing that left splinters. If you grabbed it too quickly, it was as much a part of my childhood as scraped knees and ice cream headaches. And as it turned out, it was up for sale. The owners, some distant relatives on my mother's side, had quietly listed it just a few weeks ago, hoping for a quick sale before the summer season. No big family announcement, no nostalgic group chat, just a discreet online posting. A forgotten relic for a forgotten family member. I clicked the contact agent button, my pulse quickening. They had erased me from their traditions, their photos, their invites, but I had one thing they didn't leverage. "Hi, this is Addie Manning. I'd like to schedule a private showing for the Ocean Point Beach House. I'm very interested in making an offer." I hit send before I could overthink it. The email shot off into the digital abyss, and for the first time in years, I felt the kind of anticipation that had nothing to do with their approval. Let the games begin? I had always been the afterthought, the forgotten sibling, the one whose absence barely caused a ripple in the family tide, but this time I wasn't going to be erased quietly. I was done being the invisible one. If they wanted to act like I didn't exist, then I'd do the same, but with a twist. The real estate agent called me back within the hour. Her voice was polished, the kind you expect from someone who sells million-dollar beach homes. "Hi, Addie. This is Michelle from Shoreline Properties. I got your inquiry about the Ocean Point Beach House. Are you available for a walkthrough this week?" I could hear the sound of ocean waves in the background, muffled but distinct, like she was already standing on a windswept balcony. Perfect. Actually, yes, I'd like to see it as soon as possible. Great, I have an opening tomorrow afternoon. Would that work for you? I glanced at my work calendar. A sea of digital meetings and deadlines. Normally, I'd rearrange my entire week for a family event, squeezing myself into their chaotic last-minute plans. But this wasn't for them. This was for me. Tomorrow works, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I'll be there. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. A rare burst of energy pushing me out of bed, I threw on a pair of black jeans, a simple white blouse, and a blazer. Sharp, but understated, the kind of outfit that said, "I'm not here to impress you, but you should still take me seriously." As I drove down the coastal highway, the ocean unfolded beside me. The sun just starting to climb over the horizon, painting the waves with streaks of gold. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, nerves and excitement twining together in my chest. I hadn't set foot in that house in over a decade, and yet every mile brought a flood of memories, both sweet and bitter. I arrived at the beachfront office a few minutes early. The building was sleek, all glass and steel, a sharp contrast to the weathered beach house I was about to claim. Michelle met me at the door, her smile bright and professional. "Addie, it's so nice to meet you in person." She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Shall we head over?" The drive from the office to the house was short, but each minute felt like an hour. When we finally pulled into the gravel driveway, the sight of the house hit me like a wave. There it was, just as I remembered. The weathered siding, the wraparound porch, the tall, narrow windows that always reminded me of curious eyes. Michelle unlocked the door, and as it swung open, the familiar scent of salt-aged wood and decades of family summers washed over me. I stepped inside, my shoes echoing on the hardwood floors. "The owners have kept it in great shape," Michelle said, her heels clicking behind me. "It's got that classic beach house charm, don't you think?" I nodded, but my mind was already racing, mapping out every inch of the space. The living room, where my dad once taught me how to two-step on a rainy afternoon. The kitchen, where my mom used to hum old Beatles songs while making grilled cheese sandwiches. The hallway lined with faded family photos I was increasingly absent from as the years went by. We moved through the house, Michelle pointing out recent upgrades. A new roof, refinished floors, fresh paint on the shutters. But all I could think about was how this place had once felt like the safest corner of my world. Before I learned that love in my family came with conditions. Upstairs, I lingered by the door to what had once been my room. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the worn brass doorknob. When I finally pushed it open, the air inside was cooler, like the room had held its breath for years. The twin bed with the seashell-patterned quilt was still there, the same one I'd slept in as a kid. The faded posters on the walls. The chipped dresser I'd painted teal one summer, the sun-bleached curtains. It was like stepping into a time capsule. I took a deep breath, the memories rushing in faster than I could process. Sleepovers with my cousins, whispered secrets after lights out, the tear-stained pillowcases from the nights I felt more alone than ever in a house full of people. Michelle's voice cut through my thoughts. "It's a beautiful property, and it's priced competitively, given the location. I have a few other interested buyers, but if you're serious, I'd suggest moving quickly." I turned to face her, my decision already made. "I'll take it," I said, my voice steady and confident in a way that surprised even me. "Full asking price. Let's get the paperwork started." Michelle's eyes widened for a split second before her polished smile returned. "Excellent. I'll have the documents ready by tomorrow." I followed her back down the stairs, my footsteps lighter, my pulse steadier. As I stepped out onto the front porch, the salty air filled my lungs, cleansing and invigorating. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking back something that had always been mine. And as I looked out over the endless stretch of ocean, I whispered to the wind. "They wanted to forget me. Let's see how that works out." I closed the door behind me, the old brass handle cool against my palm, and walked back to my car, the crunch of gravel under my boots, the only sound in the quiet, sea-salted air. Tomorrow, I'd sign the papers. And in 2 weeks, the family that had so easily written me out of their story would be walking into a house that no longer belonged to them. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left out. I signed the papers that Friday, the ink still drying on my name as Michelle handed me the thick stack of documents. The weight of the folder felt like a decade's worth of forgotten birthdays, silent Thanksgivings, and cropped-out family photos. But this time I was the one holding the pen. "Congratulations!" "Addie," Michelle said, her smile bright and professional. "You're officially the owner of the Ocean Point Beach House." The words echoed in my mind as I walked out of her office, the salty air from the nearby ocean filling my lungs. I slid the papers into my bag and headed back to my car, my footsteps lighter than they had been in years. As I drove back toward the city, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, a message from Lila. "Lila, heard you closed on a beach house. Please tell me it's the one I think it is." I smirked my fingers, tapping out a quick reply. "Me, it's exactly the one you think it is." Her response came almost instantly. "Lila, you're my hero. Let me know when you need backup." Backup. I'd need it soon enough, but for now, I had other things to handle. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down at my kitchen table, the stack of closing documents beside me. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers moving with a newfound certainty as I logged into the online rental platform the previous owners had used to manage bookings. I scrolled through the calendar. My family's week, the annual Manning Family Beach Week, was still wide open. No reservations, no overlapping bookings, just a big empty stretch of sun-drenched days waiting to be claimed. I clicked on the dates, my heart thudding in my chest as I filled in the reservation details. Guest name, Adelaide Manning, check-in. July 14th, check-out. July 21st. Special requests. Please ensure the house is stocked with fresh linens, local craft beer, and a bottle of champagne. I hit confirm before I could overthink it, the digital notification flashing back at me. Reservation confirmed. I leaned back in my chair, the faint hum of my refrigerator the only sound in my apartment. I let the tension in my shoulders melt away, the cool glass of wine against my palm grounding me in this moment. For years, I had been the one waiting for an invitation, the one left wondering why I wasn't included, why my name never made it onto the guest list. But not this time. This time, I was the one holding the keys. The next morning, I drove back to the beach house, my car packed with essentials, cleaning supplies, fresh sheets, and a bottle of wine for the first night I'd spend there alone. As I pulled into the driveway, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the gravel, I felt a strange mix of nostalgia and anticipation. I unlocked the door, the cool air from inside the house greeting me like an old friend. I set down my bags in the entryway, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet, a reminder of the summers I had spent here as a kid. I walked through each room, opening windows to let in the salty breeze, my footsteps echoing off the walls. I ran my fingers along the chipped banister of the staircase, the one my dad had sanded down and repainted every spring like some kind of ritual. As I moved through the house, I mentally cataloged the things that needed updating. Fresh paint, new light fixtures, a proper deep clean. But those were projects for another day. Today was about reclaiming a space that had once felt like home before my family had turned it into a monument to their selective memories. I spent the rest of the afternoon scrubbing countertops, airing out musty linens, and dragging old, sun-bleached furniture onto the front porch to make room for the pieces I planned to bring in. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of lavender and peach, I had transformed the house into something that felt like mine. I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the back deck, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. As I sipped my wine, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Lila. "Me, the house is officially mine. I'm moving in this weekend. Let the family games begin." She replied with a series of fire emojis and a simple hell yes. I smiled, the weight of years of exclusion and quiet resentment slowly lifting off my shoulders. As the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: anticipation. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't just an afterthought, I was the main character in my own story. I leaned against the railing, the cool ocean breeze lifting my hair, and whispered into the wind, "Let's see who shows up." 2 weeks later, I was sitting on the porch of my newly reclaimed beach house, the salty breeze ruffling the pages of the paperback I'd picked up at a gas station on my way back from the closing. It was a cheesy thriller, the kind you forget about as soon as you close the cover. But it did the job of keeping my mind off what I knew was coming. I had settled into the house quickly. The rooms felt like mine again, my touch slowly replacing the ghosts of family summers past. The old seashell wind chime I'd found in a forgotten storage closet now hung on the front porch. Its delicate, clinking song, a quiet reminder of simpler times I had painted over the peeling walls, scrubbed away the musty odors, and filled the place with fresh flowers and bright coastal-themed throw pillows. I had even taken the time to strip down the old porch swing my dad built one summer, sanding it smooth before painting it a deep ocean blue. I hung it on the same rusted chains, their creak now a familiar part of my mornings. It felt good reclaiming this place, reclaiming myself. The first crack in their ignorance came in the form of a group chat ping late on a Tuesday night. I had just finished my second glass of wine when my phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a flurry of notifications. Family chat. May. Hey, can someone confirm the booking for the beach house? The listing says it's not available for our week. Might be a mistake. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, the kind that blooms in the chest like the first sip of a strong drink. I set my wine glass down and leaned back into the porch swing, the warm night air clinging to my skin. I waited, my phone vibrating every few seconds as the messages continued. Aunt Rhonda. Probably just a glitch. I'm sure it's fine, Jake. Yeah, last time it didn't show up either. Call the owners. May. I did voicemail. I stifled a laugh, imagining May pacing her designer kitchen, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping the countertop in frustration. Then my phone rang, May's name flashing across the screen. I let it ring, a slow smile spreading across my face as the waves crashed softly in the distance. A moment later, the chat buzzed again. May Addie, you live close by, right? Can you swing by and check if the house is actually booked or if it's just a system error? I paused, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. The same sister who had cropped me out of family photos without a second thought, who had told me to stop being so sensitive when I confronted her about it, was now reaching out to me for help. I typed a quick response. Me sorry, can't already staying there. The chat fell silent. I imagined the stunned expressions, the slow realization, the dawning awareness that they had overlooked something. Someone important. It took a full 5 minutes before the first response popped up. Jake, wait, what? You're at the beach house. Since when? I took a slow, satisfied sip of my wine before typing back, me since I bought it. The typing dots flickered, disappeared, then returned as the family collectively struggled to process this new reality. Aunt Rhonda. Addie, what are you talking about? The house is still in the family. It's always been. Me not anymore, closed on it last week. Check the records if you don't believe me. Another long pause. I could almost hear the clinking of ice cubes in their expensive whiskey glasses, the uncomfortable shifting on leather sofas. Mayu bought the family beach house without telling anyone. I leaned back into the swing, the sea breeze lifting my hair, and let myself smile. Really smile for the first time in years. Me, well, you never included me in your plans, so I figured it wouldn't matter. Silence. Then finally, May, this is a joke, right? You're messing with us. I locked my phone, dropped it onto the cushion beside me, and closed my eyes. The gentle creak of the swing, a lullaby against the backdrop of crashing waves. No, it wasn't a joke. It was reality, my reality. I poured myself another glass of wine, watching the horizon as the last traces of daylight melted into the sea. The wind picked up, sending the seashell chimes into a soft, mournful chorus. Let them stew, let them rage. They had erased me for years, written me out of their lives without a second thought. Now they'd have to say my name. To each other, to the rental company, to the empty air. They'd have to acknowledge that I existed, that I mattered, that I wasn't just some forgotten footnote in their perfectly curated family narrative. I took a long, slow sip of my wine, the dark, rich taste settling warmly in my chest. For once, the silence felt like mine, not something imposed on me. As the first stars appeared in the sky, I whispered into the dark, salt-kissed air, "Welcome to my house." A week after my last message in the family group chat, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly against the wooden nightstand. I groaned, rolling over to squint at the screen. It was a flurry of notifications from the family chat, my screen a cascade of missed calls and panicked texts. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and sat up, my hair a tangled mess from a night of restless dreams. I had known this moment was coming, but it still hit harder than I expected. "May, Addie, this isn't funny. We need to talk, Aunt Rhonda." "What's going on with the beach house? I'm hearing rumors, Jake. Seriously?" "Addie, what the hell?" I chuckled, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed and stretching my arms overhead. I had known this family my whole life. Their patterns, their tells, their unspoken hierarchies. They weren't mad because I had bought the house. They were mad because I had acted without their permission, without their blessing. I had broken the silent, unspoken rule of always making myself smaller to fit into their narrative. I padded down the stairs, the cool wood creaking under my bare feet, and flipped the switch on the coffee maker. As the kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages again. I had half a mind to ignore them, to let them twist in the wind a little longer, but that wasn't my style. If I had learned one thing over the years, it was that silence could be as powerful as a scream, but only if you wielded it right. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the morning light filtering in through the salt-streaked windows, and finally typed out a reply. "Me morning. Everyone, I don't see what the big deal is. You all wanted the house available for the family week, right? Well, it is. You just have to ask me for the keys." I hit send and took a slow, satisfying sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest. Seconds later, my phone started vibrating again, the messages coming in faster now, the tone shifting from confused to indignant. "May, you can't just take over the family house, Addie." "That's not fair, Jake. Seriously, this is low. Even for you, Aunt Rhonda. I don't understand why you'd do this. You know how important this tradition is to all of us." I smirked, leaning against the counter as I typed my response. "Me important to all of you, maybe. You've made it pretty clear over the years that I wasn't part of that equation." There was a long pause, the kind that stretches tight like a rubber band about to snap, and then, "May, this isn't about that. Don't make it about that." I felt a flicker of old anger, the kind that had fueled my late-night drives and solitary beach walks for years, but I tamped it down, my fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. "Me. Actually, that's exactly what this is about. I've been erased, ignored, and excluded from this family for years. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." The typing dots appeared and disappeared, a stuttering Morse code of familial panic, before finally settling into a single message from Aunt Rhonda. "Aunt Rhonda, you're being dramatic. Addie, you know we've always included you." I laughed, the sound echoing off the tiled walls, sharp and bitter. It felt good to laugh like that, to let the disbelief and betrayal bubble up without choking it back. "Me really? Is that why my name has been missing from every invite for the past decade? Is that why you post family photos without me in them? Is that why you forget to call me on my birthday every year? Another long silence, the digital void stretching out between us like a chasm. I could almost hear the frantic phone calls happening behind the scenes, the whispered conversations, the growing realization that they had lost control of the narrative. Finally, a single message from May. "May, you're blowing this way out of proportion. We can talk about this in person when we get there." I felt a cold, steely resolve harden in my chest, my fingers flying over the keyboard. "Me, there's nothing to talk about. I own the house you want in, you ask, and if you want to stay, you pay." I hit send, the message zipping off into the ether, and turned my phone face down on the counter. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug and stared out at the rising sun, the waves rolling in with a steady, indifferent rhythm. For the first time in years, I felt the sharp, clear edges of my own power. Not a borrowed thing, Not something granted or withheld by others, but something I had reclaimed brick by brick, board by board, like the house around me. I took another sip of my coffee, the heat spreading through my chest, and whispered into the quiet, empty kitchen. Welcome to my world. I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the rocky shoreline, the salt-laden air seeping in through the cracked window. I stretched the sheets cool against my skin and let the morning light wash over me. It was the first time in years that I felt truly at peace, like my life was finally aligning with the rhythm of the tides outside. My phone, still face down on the nightstand, buzzed quietly, a soft, persistent hum against the wood. I sighed, rubbing the last traces of sleep from my eyes before reaching for it. More messages, more missed calls. The family chat was a storm of unread texts, the kind of digital chaos I had learned to ignore years ago. I swiped through the notifications, skimming the frantic messages. May, Addie, you can't just do this. We need to talk, Aunt Rhonda. This is getting out of hand. Call me Jake. You're being a real piece of work, you know that? I smiled a small, satisfied curve of my lips and set the phone back down. I had no intention of calling them back. They could sit in their confusion and frustration a little longer. I pulled on a pair of faded jeans and a loose off-shoulder sweatshirt, the kind I'd worn as a teenager during those long, sticky summer nights on this very beach. I padded down the stairs, the familiar creak of the old wood comforting, and made my way to the kitchen. As I poured my morning coffee, I glanced out the window at the winding driveway. The gravel crunched under the wheels of an approaching car, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. I frowned, setting my mug down and stepping closer to the glass. The car rolled to a stop, the engine purring before cutting off. The door swung open and out stepped May, her blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her designer sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. I let out a slow breath, my pulse quickening, and leaned against the cool granite of the kitchen counter. This was it. The confrontation I had known was coming. She approached the front steps, her heels clicking sharply against the weathered wood. I waited, the silence of the house around me, thick and expectant, before finally reaching for the front door. I pulled it open just as she raised her hand to knock. She blinked clearly, startled to find me already there, and slipped off her sunglasses, revealing eyes as sharp and cold as the Atlantic in winter. May, I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. To what do I owe the pleasure? She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her gaze sweeping over the freshly painted walls, the polished floors, the light, airy curtains I had hung to replace the heavy, sun-bleached drapes of our childhood. So it's true, she said, her voice low and tight. You really bought it? I crossed my arms, letting the door swing closed behind her. I told you as much in the group chat. She took a slow, deliberate turn around the living room, her fingers brushing the edge of the kitchen island, the backs of the reclaimed wood dining chairs, the cool, sea glass vase I had placed on the mantel. You had no right, she snapped, turning to face me, her eyes narrowed. This house belongs to the family. I felt a spark of old anger, the kind that had simmered beneath the surface for years. But I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm, to remember the power of silence. No, I said, my voice even. It belonged to the family. Past tense. Now it belongs to me. She clenched her jaw, her perfectly manicured nails curling into her palms. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes, the frantic calculations, the dawning realization that she had no leverage here. You're being selfish, she spat, her voice rising. This house was supposed to be for all of us, for family gatherings, for summers together, for our kids to make memories like we did. I let out a short, bitter laugh, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. Really, May? When was the last time you actually included me in one of those family gatherings? When was the last time my name made it onto an invite list or a group photo or a birthday text? She flinched, a small, involuntary movement that gave me a flicker of satisfaction. I'm not doing this, she said, shaking her head, her ponytail whipping back and forth like an angry horse's tail. I didn't drive all the way out here to fight with you. "Then why are you here?" I shot back, stepping closer, my bare feet cool against the polished floor. "To guilt me into handing the house back over, to play the martyr and remind me how I'm ruining your perfectly curated family image." Her lips tightened, her eyes flashing. "You're being dramatic." I laughed again, louder this time, the sound startling even me. "Of course I am." I said the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Because that's all I ever was to you, right? The dramatic, oversensitive little sister. The one who left and never looked back. The one who got too big for her britches, as Aunt Rhonda used to say." May's face flushed a deep, angry red that clashed sharply with her pale skin. For a moment, I thought she might slap me, might throw one of the carefully curated pieces of coastal decor at my head. But she just stood there, her chest heaving, her perfectly polished nails digging into her palms, and I realized with a sudden, startling clarity that she had nothing. No power, no leverage, no control. Not here, not anymore. I took a slow, deliberate step back, my bare feet, whispering against the cool, polished wood, and gestured toward the door. "If you want to stay, May, you know where to find the rental application. Otherwise, I suggest you turn around. Walk back to your overpriced SUV and leave my house." For a long, breathless moment, she just stared at me, her eyes bright and furious, her chest rising and falling like a storm-tossed wave. Then without another word, she turned on her heel, her footsteps sharp and angry against the floorboards, and stalked out the door, slamming it behind her. I let out a long, slow breath, my pulse finally beginning to settle, and leaned back against the counter. The house creaked around me, the old wood settling into place like a sigh of relief. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, the steam rising in the cool morning air, and took a long, slow sip. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my family's expectations lifting, their whispered criticisms and half-hearted apologies dissolving like morning mist. I had taken the house back piece by piece, brick by brick, and in doing so, I had taken myself back too. Story 2. Hello? My parents referred to me as garbage because I married a black man they believed to be unimportant. My sister's marriage to Rich was commended by them. They said that I was a disgrace, but they were unaware of his true identity. Furthermore, it was too late to repair the harm by the time they discovered it. Tell me what time it is where you are before we start. Have you ever experienced criticism because of the people you loved? Please leave a remark below. I'm paying attention. The handkerchief's delicate cotton was pressed between my fingers as I stood there, the corner of the embroidery unraveling a little R and M hours. It had been dropped carelessly. Perhaps me, perhaps someone else is making subtle attempts to be harsh. However, no one dared to speak out loud about the fact that it was discovered next to the garbage can, which felt intentional, like an exclamation point at the end of a sentence. Like a breath held for too long, the air outside the country club was thick and sticky. Marcus had approached the automobile with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders straightened but exhausted. With my heels clicking on the stone walkway, I followed him a few paces until we arrived at the car. Neither of us spoke. He did what he usually did and opened the passenger side door for me. Despite what has recently transpired, he remains a gentleman. Are you all right? As I settled in, he inquired quietly. I said, folding the handkerchief carefully in my lap as if it still contained a precious object. I don't even know what that word means anymore. It felt like something had been taken from us and left back there on that breakfast table between the silver pitchers and the clinking mimosas, since the journey home was quiet, not tense, just hollow. I refrained from crying. I didn't have to. Rather, I tallied how many times, even in my 30s, I had sat at the children's table. The business milestones were omitted from the birthdays. They never inquired as to why Mom had looked at Marcus as if he had brought dirt upon her flawless picture. I kept track of the number of times I had ignored it and told myself they just don't understand yet. In actuality, though, they did comprehend. They simply didn't give a damn. Marcus was already untying his tie as we arrived at the driveway. Our small craftsman-style house is tucked away in a quiet neighborhood on Atlanta's east side. Together, we had purchased it 5 years prior. No inheritance, no assistance, only a loan and our own savings. We made an early payment. The aroma of lavender greeted me as soon as I opened the front door. The oil diffuser had precisely timed itself. What irony. In our house, everything went more smoothly than at any family gathering I'd ever been to. Marcus went to the kitchen. I'll prepare tea. He extended an offer, as he usually did. When a pain was too great to be covered with words. Keeping the handkerchief in my hand, I nodded and walked into the living room. I set it down beside the coaster that said, "Love grows best in little houses," on the coffee table. I nearly laughed for a split second, but it was a sharp, bitter moment. I took a seat and turned on my laptop. This was not what I had intended to accomplish today. Something inside of me had tilted, broken open, but not like this. Perhaps it was the expression on my mother's face when she said, "You married down, dear," like the stock value of love. As though Marcus, the man who spent all night with me during times of abrupt layoffs and failed startups, was not as much as the plastic charm that was adhered to his fiancée's phony smile. Marcus wasn't a janitor, something they were unaware of. He had never been. That was the narrative. We gave them credence. In addition to having more than 60 workers, he owned a janitorial business, 5 contracts throughout the state, and a silent partnership in a commercial real estate group that recently closed on a $12 million portfolio. But since we wanted to see if they would ever love me, we never corrected them. For myself, today's response had been loud and obvious. I opened the Estate Holdings Bundy Ventures folder that had been set up by me. Marcus had insisted that everything be listed with me as a co-owner. As they poured mimosas and laughed at my poor decisions, we had created an empire right in front of them. I still yearned for their love, even though he never required their approval or at least their recognition. I was brought back by a gentle clink. Marcus sat on the armrest and set a cup next to me. "I apologize," he said quietly and simply, but with a hint of hurt that he was trying very hard to conceal. I gave a headshake. "There's nothing to apologize for." He gave me a prolonged look. "So why do I feel like I'm the cause of their continued abuse of you?" I put my head on his chest and leaned into him. "Since the mirror is you, you show them who they really are." He held me close, one hand rubbing circles on my shoulder, and I thought about that handkerchief. How even love, stitched carefully, could be tossed aside when it didn't fit someone else's narrative, but not mine. Not this time. I held that small linen square all the way home. It sat in my lap like an unanswered question. The city passed by in quiet blurs. Storefronts we knew by heart. Intersections where we'd once argued over directions. The florist shop where Marcus surprised me with white lilies after my first miscarriage. Back at the house. The familiar click of the front door brought me back to the present. Marcus headed straight for the kitchen, loosened his collar, and asked if I wanted roasted salmon or stir-fry. I said, "Whatever's easy," though neither of us felt like eating. He moved through the motions anyway, calm and careful, as if protecting the last piece of our dignity was something that started with a hot pan and fresh garlic. I walked to the bedroom and closed the door behind me gently. The room was dim lit only by the soft amber of a single lamp on the dresser. On the wall was our wedding photo. Just the two of us in front of a courthouse in Savannah. Me in a simple ivory dress, him in his Sunday best, no family standing beside us. Just a gust of wind lifting my veil and his hands around my waist, like he knew how fragile that day was. I stared at it for a while, my reflection in the glass barely visible. They said, I married beneath me. But what they didn't say, the thing they never asked, was why I chose him. Not once had anyone in my family asked me what he was like when I was sick, or how he'd held me through every rejection letter when my grant proposals were denied. Instead, I got Callisto's fiancé just bought her a Tesla. Are you two still renting? And of course you can't turn a janitor into a gentleman. The thing is, Marcus wasn't even a janitor. That was just the label they slapped on him the day they saw his name tag, when he helped clean up after a charity gala. They never asked what he was doing there. Never noticed. He didn't answer to anyone that the warehouse manager reported to him, but I let them think it. Maybe because I wanted to know who they really were without the masks. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my mind drift to years ago, senior year of high school. The auditorium was packed. I had just won the Georgia State Science Symposium first place for my project on solar nanofiltration. The principal shook my hand. The crowd clapped, and I turned to look for my parents. They were clapping too, but not for me. Callista had made cheer captain that same week, and Mom had brought balloons. "She's got presents," Dad said that night at dinner. "Not all of us are meant for microscopes." Later that same spring, Callista brought home a boy from a powerful family, son of a senator. I remember the way they welcomed him, like royalty, when I told them I wanted to go to prom with Aaron, my lab partner, a quiet, brilliant boy who happened to be black. Mom pursed her lips and said, "You're not ready for that kind of trouble, sweetie. I wasn't allowed to go." They never said the word out loud, but I heard it anyway. It wasn't about race. Not just race. It was image, status, appearances. That was the god they worshipped. And I was the offering they'd happily sacrifice to satisfy it. Dinner dishes clinked quietly in the kitchen. The fragrance of lemon and rosemary floated in pleasant and soothing. I rose up, walked over to the dresser, and opened my laptop. It was there. A draft blog article I had written months ago. Never published. Married to a billionaire. Treated like a burden. I clicked it open and browsed slowly. Paragraph after paragraph lay it all out. Marcus's stock holdings, the private investment corporation he'd formed from the ground up. The break he took only to handle operations personally and get his hands dirty. I had written every word with the goal that one day I'd be ready to reveal it, to draw back the curtain, and let the world know who we truly were. But it wasn't the goal anymore. I didn't require cheers. Headlines weren't what I wanted. All I wanted was to get the question out of my head. If they knew who he was, would they still despise me? I had my response immediately. After scrolling to the bottom of the post, I selected Save Draft instead of Publish. Not right now. Marcus's calm, quiet voice emerged from the corridor. Dinner is prepared. After shutting off the laptop, I got up and stroked the corner of our wedding picture once more. They might never see it, I muttered. However, I do. And for now, that's plenty. The aroma of grilled salmon greeted me once again as I entered the corridor. A comfortable chair, a warm dish, and a man who had always been on par with me without a title. I didn't require retribution. All I needed was one more indication that they didn't see me just what they thought I was worth. Unbelievably, it appeared 3 mornings later, like a peace offering. It was tucked away in our mailbox from a person who had never shown regret. A thick, pretentious envelope with a cream tint. My name had a gold stamped on it. Just the first name. Recognize and guess, Marcus is not acknowledged. Instead of being handwritten, the address label was printed. I stopped at the doorway and stroked my fingers over the edge of the envelope, the sunshine grazing my tips. Perhaps this could have been it. Perhaps they noticed me at last. Perhaps this was a start in the right direction. A flat, glossy card with a marble backdrop and rose gold accents. A picture of Callista wearing a white gown and a guy next to her who appeared to have rehearsed smiling in front of the mirror were all inside. Celebrate the marriage of Sterling Ballard, a rising IT innovator in the South, and Callista Winthrop. No call, no message, not even a glimmer of optimism. You're capable of making it. For a long time, I stood in the foyer with my card in hand, unsure of whether to scream or laugh. Rather, I placed it on the table in the foyer and proceeded to prepare tea. Just after 8 o'clock that evening, my phone rang. I left it on voicemail. Mom, then she phoned once again, a minute later. I took up Rowena against my better judgment. That's the airy, performative tone I use for HOA meetings and cocktail parties, she remarked. I hope you received the invitation. It's going to be amazing. My dear Rivtech and Sterling just concluded their agreement. Officially, he is now worth 8 figures. Is it not unbelievable? Someone with vision truly found our tiny Callista. I kept quiet and chewed the inside of my cheek. She sped forward. The Foxhall Resort will host it. Completely catered jazz performance. Oh, and the list of guests, CEOs, governors, and even the Channel 5 anchor. No hold on, no how are you. Marcus is not mentioned. I cleared my throat. Should I go? Okay, she paused. Seldom. You know, it's more of a carefully planned event. Of course, we would appreciate your help in other ways as well. Callista is adamant that it be sophisticated. I recall the stillness that ensued, but I don't recall hanging up. Marcus's brows lifted slightly as he looked across from the couch where he was folding laundry. I gave a headshake. Just sounds, I said. After 2 days, my phone buzzed once more. Callista sent a text message. Mom feels a $1.15K artwork from your favorite gallery would be ideal. Could you forward it to the location? No, hello, no, how are you? Not even a please. I read it again and again and again. I couldn't decide which hurt more. The fact that they genuinely think that's all I'm good for, or the nonchalant arrogance and ATM that walks. She completely forgot my birthday last year. Even so, I took 20 minutes to compose a handwritten message and send her tulips. I had carefully chosen every phrase. I secretly hope that people will see me as more than a stand-in for important family occasions. The night air brushed my face as I stepped out onto the balcony. Below, the city glowed like a far-off lie. Beautiful from a distance, close up empty. I leaned on the railing and recalled all the times I had stepped in while they were in need of anything. I paid Grandpa's medical bills when they became overwhelming. I provided coverage for the contractors when Mom's roof collapsed following the storm. Callista needed her car fixed quickly. She didn't give Dad a call. She gave me a call. But affection. Love was never unconditional. Evaluated based on my social standing, lowered by my skin tone, financial situation, or appearance, I took out my phone and typed in the Notes app. Don't send a present. They told you the truth. Give them yours. I kept it. Shut down the screen. A few minutes later, Marcus emerged onto the balcony and placed a hot mug of chamomile next my elbow. He didn't inquire. He didn't have to. I turned to face him. I was invited. Sort of. They also want me to do something. He gave a soft smile. They do, of course. Although I didn't respond to the SMS, I did begin planning. I sent something else, but not the painting. They were caught off guard. The next Monday morning, right after I had finished loading the dishes and Marcus had gone for his daily exercise, a silent phone call was made. Staring out at the gentle Atlanta mist drifting past the windows, I stood barefoot on the tile floor. My ear was pressed to the phone. Felder, Mr. I spoke in a steady tone, Rowena. A pleasure every time, he replied kindly. The Morales couple's grant renewal was recently on my mind. With the repurposed installations, they've made significant strides. Actually, that's the reason I'm phoning, I replied as I walked over to the counter to get myself another cup of coffee. I want to give them all of my money. Waiting for the board meeting is not necessary. Simply send the sum we agreed upon. He was changing something on his desk, and there was a pause. I mean, that's amazing. They will be ecstatic. I carefully put the cup down. Remove the Delfino Gallery's involvement in the Winthrop Dillard event as well. He took a while to answer. Carefully, he said, Rowena, this Friday is the date. They have already done so. I understand, however, we have often said that our gallery does not adhere to performative norms. You also previously informed me that you had more than just personal admiration for Marcus. It had a philosophical bent. A little silence fell on the line. Then, when he leaned back, I heard his leather chair crack faintly as he breathed gently. "That's correct," he responded. "This afternoon, I'll give them a call." I put my phone on the counter and hung up. Then at last I opened my mouth. In the morning of Thursday, the ripples turned into waves. I could see the silent unraveling without having to go very far. On the PR circuit, there was a rumor of panic. Their unique collection, which was meant to transform the evening from ordinary to exclusive, was taken away along with the premier art partner from Callisto's engagement ceremony. According to one publication, it seems like someone attempted to swap out the pieces for mass-produced flower canvases from a warehouse that specializes in home decor. It was not favorably received. The downward interaction lost its luster overnight, according to one tweet from Curated to Cringe. While folding clothes that night, I noticed it, even though I wasn't tagged. Once more, my phone buzzed. Through an old buddy, I received a message from a journalist I knew in passing. "Was this you?" was all it said. I tapped out a single emoji, a closed-lipped grin, and sent it after staring at the screen. I was not going to offer them a headline, and I owed them no explanation. Friday arrived as I stirred a pot of lentil soup in our little kitchen. My curiosity overcame my lack of desire to watch the live video. After setting his iPad down on the counter, Marcus accessed the feed. It was just the scene I had anticipated. Glitzy guests, a white-draped pavilion, and the oppressive humidity of the South. However, something was lacking. Art with just flat space and a few strewn-about centerpieces, the stark walls behind the stage shouted louder than any well-planned design. Too much effort was put into it. On a hot mic, Sterling's mother was heard stating, "This is beneath us." Although Callista was grinning, her eyes were not. I switched off the iPad. Around 9 o'clock that evening, my phone called once again. The name glowing on the screen was predictable, yet I nearly didn't respond. I took it up and said nothing. Mom, before I could even let out a breath, her voice screamed over the line. "What did you do?" I crossed one leg over the other and sat on the couch's edge. "And hello to you, Rowena. Don't be a coy with me. Whatever you did, you pulled your name and your money. We were all humiliated. Your sister's special day was wrecked by you." After putting the phone aside for a while, I returned it. Nothing was ruined by me. I just decided not to take part. Didn't you always desire that? You're being vindictive. You're envious. It nearly made me chuckle. What is the object of jealousy? A performance based on phony smiles and stolen taste. Everything has always had to be about you. That was painful. However, I kept it from her. I spoke in a cool, collected tone. "You requested distance." "Mom, I'm only paying respect to it." A little stillness fell. The line then stopped working. That evening, I didn't return the call. The summer's buzz melted into the distance as the sky became darker over the metropolis, wearing a cozy fleece blanket across my shoulders. I stood out on the balcony with his hair still wet from the shower. Marcus emerged barefoot and stood next to me. I had something in my hand, but he didn't ask any questions. A little velvet box I had originally planned to present them with a carved sculpture of two interwoven trees that I had created months ago, with a Santa Fe artist. One represented the roots of resilience, while the other represented Ash, a family despite its flaws. I didn't send it. I wouldn't. When Marcus saw me standing there with the little velvet box, he remained silent. He just took a step toward me, put his arm over my shoulders, and joined me in the silent buzz of the night. Words weren't necessary. A little truce. Keep quiet. The engagement celebration was no longer in the news. 3 days later, the family conversation subsided. However, I hadn't. That morning, it was pouring. Our loft's windows are tapped by steady, gentle drips. The rain that slows time and muffles hearing. I had remained in bed. I didn't think it was necessary. Or perhaps I wasn't worthy of moving just yet. On the nightstand next to me, Marcus had set out a freshly brewed cup of coffee, still warm. When he brought it in, he had remained silent with the same gentle elegance he usually exuded. He just bent down and kissed my temple before leaving the room, unfocused. I lay there while the dim morning light gradually illuminated the ceiling. We were holding hands in the garden outside the courthouse, laughing foolishly, and the framed picture from our wedding was sitting on the dresser opposite from me. Not a big cake, no gowns that match. None of my relatives had arrived. No voicemail at all. I assumed they would soften with time, I muttered into the space. They hadn't been weakened by time. All it had done was polish their masks. For some reason, I reached for my phone, perhaps to see how the weather is. Maybe to remind myself that life had been going on by looking at photos from the previous several weeks. Instead, I noticed a fresh voice memo that had been accidentally sent from the family group chat. The caption appeared to be a recent update from Dad. When I initially tapped it, all I heard was static and then my father's voice. She decided to wed someone beneath herself. What am I supposed to say? She never made good decisions. He laughed, a cruel chuckle. It's more like someone enjoying a personal joke. Callista heard another voice. I mean, I got married. I didn't bring humiliation, at least. Then there was quiet. I slowly sat up. I had the impression that my body was composed of damp sand. Not because it was surprising, but because it was so intentional and natural. My hand shaking as I held the phone. They didn't anticipate me hearing it. That was the section that caused a deep crack. I nearly erased it. I kept my thumb on the small trash symbol. Like they had attempted to remove parts of me for decades, I could have erased it. However, I didn't. I wrote a note reminder for when I forgot hit forward instead and sent it to my own email. I even said to myself that I would never consider requesting their affection again. Play this. I glanced at the ceiling while I put the phone face down on the bed. Even though the room was silent, I could still hear their arrogant, mocking voices. The type of contempt that stems from belief rather than disagreement. A conviction that I was never sufficient, that I would always be the daughter who let them down just by being different from them, regardless of what I accomplished, who I loved, or what I created. After getting up and ultimately putting Marcus's flannel shirt on, I went barefoot into the living room. The coffee was chilly. I didn't reheat it. It was no longer necessary for me. I tidied out the hall closet that afternoon. I needed something to handle, to discard, to organize, not because it required it. There was a box in the back that I hadn't opened in a long time. Cards for birthdays, a few of ancient letters, a corsage of dried roses. That night, when the city was still drenched in rain and the fireplace in the corner was flickering low, nobody came to see me where I threw the most of it. I threw away the wedding invitation and sat on the rug with what was left. It was already half singed. Months earlier, in a moment of weakness, I had ignited the edge, but I never allowed it to burn through. Then I wasn't prepared. Right now, I gazed at the flawlessly printed gold writing and the burned corner. Together with their families, they read it. I exhaled steadily and calmly, and I leaned forward, fed the invitation to the flames, and watched as the last of the sunset's embers fell beyond the horizon. The smoke alarm did not sound. When I woke up the following morning, the smell of burned paper was still there, but the flames had long since extinguished. In the dish near the fireplace, the wedding invitation's ashes were still there. Little curls of illusion. Gray, I kept my hands off of them. Instead, I walked barefoot into my home office, pulled Marcus's bulky cardigan about myself, and turned on the laptop. The inbox hadn't waited, even though I hadn't been here in a few days. I halted after clicking through a fundraising application and a few bills. Subject line, limited edition preview, gift launch, bridal registry. I was too familiar with the sender, a lifestyle PR business that had previously collaborated with Callista Startup. Without opening it, I nearly erased it. Nevertheless, a part of me that was intrigued and bitter clicked. The email's body was pink and happy with plenty of exclamation points. Slowly, a carousel of pictures loaded. My chest constricted after the fourth one. It was a domestic kitchen appliance, streamlined, uncomplicated, and made to fit neatly on a tabletop. An environmentally friendly flour sifter featuring 2 compartments and a powdered covering. It said in the caption, "The Winthrop studio team created the design. A patent is still pending." However, I had already seen it. I carefully got up, moved to the closet in the hallway, and took an old shoebox from the top shelf. Inside was a prototype that had been manually soldered and wrapped in brown paper. Marcus, our first flat 3 years ago. I recall him making jokes while using a butter knife to sand the edge. Although it works, it won't take home any honors. He had spent the grocery money on components, so that night we had cereal for supper. Back at my computer, I opened an old Google Drive folder that I had created without Marcus ever realizing. In it, I had scanned and saved all of Marcus's sketches and sample designs that he had placed on the table with the disclaimer that they weren't yet final. Save time by not filing it. However, I had filed them all under the name of an LLC I had set up for freelance consulting years prior. Dusty and dormant, but still mine. You defend the man you care about. Even from his own optimism, I muttered. My sister was now using it to market her dream under her own name. I didn't weep without even acknowledging it. I refrained from screaming. Marcus wasn't even texted by me. Rather, I took a legal pad out of my legal archive folder and opened a template. I altered the product, SKU, the date, and the contact line's name to the Winthrop Collective subject, stop and desist. Misuse of intellectual property without permission. I included my pseudonym, Clara Vive Lawn, legal representative June Stone Holdings, LLC beneath the signature line. A pale yellow sticky note was then in my grasp, and I wrote only one line on it before tucking it into the envelope. You thought the concept was fantastic. You just were unaware that it belonged to us. I divided it into my outgoing courier container and sealed it, sending it to the company that represented Callista Company. Clean, quiet, and devoid of showmanship. I watched the clouds move low across the city skyline and then stood at the window for a while. The air was colder, cleaner. There would only be a gradual tightening of the noose on their ambition. No announcement, no news conference. My phone buzzed as I turned to go. Mom sent me a new email. I can't wait to attend Callista's bridal breakfast on Sunday. Only the family keeps it elegant. I'm eager. Don't bring me up. I wasn't keyed at all. It had been accidentally forwarded. Once more, no address or RSVP. Nothing but quiet. As thick as syrup. I let the screen to go dark. I went to the coat rack and grabbed my jacket. I wasn't going to remain at home, but they hadn't invited me either. With firm hands, I buttoned the ivory blazer and tucked the phone into my coat pocket. It was early, the clear morning air that felt like reality. Sharp, cool, and hard to ignore. The sun had already spanned the hills by the time I got out of the automobile in front of the grape estate, and the vines were glowing as if they had been touched with honey. They had already started the bridal breakfast. The celebration area included a tiered grass with flowing floral displays and white tents. The sound of clinking drinks and laughing blended with the gentle jazz that permeated the atmosphere. Everything exuded tasteful elegance. I showed up even though I wasn't invited. Callista was standing in the middle of the toast inside the main tent, holding a glass of champagne and sporting an ivory outfit that appeared to have been taken from a magazine photo shoot, pure and deliberate sterile. No one missed my entrance. When she noticed me at the back, her voice faltered for a moment. The executives at the table where our mother sat were all beaming as if they had just clinched a $1 million transaction. Her face clouded as soon as she spotted me. Without even attempting to soften her tone, she stated, "This isn't about you, Rowena." My dad didn't raise his eyes from his mimosa. He only mumbled. We made it apparent whose moment this is, I believe. The guests looked about. Some tilted their heads, some mumbled, and some avoided eye contact. One lady gripped her pearls. Not in a symbolic sense, literally. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I located a vacant area close to the tent's edge, folded my hands in front of me, and listened. Callista sprang back fast, lifting her flute once again. As I mentioned before, family is more than simply your biological relatives. It's also the people that encourage you and best represent you. And in order to preserve your serenity, you occasionally have to make difficult decisions. A few of giggles, a few courteous nods, barbs wrapped in ribbon, and anger thinly disguised. The servers completely ignored my side of the tent as they gave out champagne once again. A young waiter interrupted me as I moved forward to take a glass from the tray in the corner. He wasn't impolite, just anxious. He looked at Callista and murmured, "I'm sorry, miss. The list does not include you." I practiced smiling a little at him. "Everything is all right. In any case, I like still water." The smile, however, was short-lived. I pivoted and proceeded through the tent's side, following a narrow stone pathway that opened into the gardens. Light purple shadows were cast on the gravel below by a wisteria arch that stretched overhead. I remained out of sight, allowing the party's hum to subside behind me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. "Please pardon me. Are you Rowena?" a deep voice asked. I pivoted. The tall, silver-haired man exuded a serene demeanor that seemed completely out of place at the circus. He had a leather folder tucked under his arm, his cuffs unfastened, and a navy suit without a tie. "Yes," he said, offering a hand. "Gregory Verne? I think you're the Rowena who salvaged our expansion during the third quarter of last year." I blinked. "You're Sterling's father." He gave a small chuckle. "Technically, yes. Albeit we manage quite different empires. He enjoys social media metrics. I appreciate factories that don't shut down." I smiled, "A real one?" "This time I didn't know you'd be here." "Neither did they." From the looks I got, he peered over his shoulder toward the tent, but my assistant confirmed it was your LLC that stepped in when our Atlanta distribution center nearly folded. "I've wanted to thank you in person. I just signed the papers." Marcus was the one who brought the statistics to life. He looked at me silently but intently for a moment. "Are they aware of your identity?" I chuckled softly. "They've never been interested enough to find out, in my opinion." Slowly he nodded. "Then perhaps now would be a good time to begin telling them." My hands were empty when I gazed down at them. "I wasn't here to cause trouble." "Excellent. Then allow me to make a recommendation." He took out his phone and moved to stand next to me. He tapped it many times before holding it up to me. "Monday morning is the board vote. Regarding a new investor block, they have requested clarification. Since you now control 12%, I've suggested that they permit your presence." I tried to breathe through the constriction in my chest as I gazed at the television. I responded, "I didn't ask for power." "No," he said with a soft smile. "However, you still deserved it." There was enough wind to shake the leaves around us. After pulling out my phone, I put a message into my contact list. "Start the voting process Monday. I'll be present at precisely 8:00 the next morning." I was picked up by Gregory Verne's driver. You couldn't tell by looking that I didn't get much sleep. I wore black for clarity, not for grief. A dress with a high neck, straight lines, and a hairpin back. I have a silver band on my right ring finger, but no other jewelry, not a ring for a wedding, a pledge to myself. It was quiet on the way to San Francisco until the skyline appeared when we crossed the bridge. At last, Gregory said something. "Keep your eyes open." "Even if they plead," he stated today. I gave him one nod as I turned to face him. "I won't." We entered Verne Holdings' executive floor at 9:14. Movement lawyers, assistants, and cameras stashed up in corners filled the hallway outside the boardroom. Despite not being invited, the journalists showed in and whispered the word "vote." Every leather chair in the boardroom was occupied. Everything smelled slightly of coffee and polished wood, and the big table shone under the fluorescent lights. Sterling dallied, sat at the head of the table, trying to project confidence, while my sister Callista, who appeared to be a statue next to him, was frail at the bottom, but perfect on the outside. She wore a cream silk dress. Her lips were tight, and her hair was perfectly curled into waves. She was surprised to see me. Not in this manner. Gregory gestured to a chair next to him. I moved carefully and gently to it and sat down, like the first blow of wind before a storm. Silence fell over the room. Gregory stood with both palms on the table and stated, "Before we start, I would like to properly present Miss Rowena Hartley as the voting co-chair for today's session." Callista's eyes widened, and she clutched her handbag. Her champagne-colored nail paint clearly shattered. The quiet was broken by her voice. Why is she in this place?" Gregory didn't panic. According to the trust charter, your involvement included a suggested equity transfer throughout the Nevada portfolio that needs a family vote that is unanimous. Moreover, Rowena is identified as a co-trustee of that organization. "You're lying," yelled Callista. "This family does not even include her. Yes, she is, cut in on paper and on record." "Gregory," I moved a slender folder to the middle of the table. 3 years ago, I signed Clause 12 by Page under the defunct Hartley Foundation. Last week, I turned it back on. Sitting at the far end, my father looked wan. "Rowena, this is not what you would do." I didn't speak louder. "I did it already." The room held its breath. Sterling, obviously bewildered, leaned forward. "Hold on. This implies Gregory stated that your engagement package would not be able to access equity interests in the Nevada and Florida assets without Rowena's vote." The quiet broke. Callista jerked to her feet. "She harbors resentment. She's been petty all her life. She couldn't establish a future for herself, so she's ruining mine." I gazed at her. Truly gazed. "My husband's designs were stolen by you. You made fun of our union. You requested my money even though you removed my name from your registration. You're upset now." At last I declined. "Callista is the mother." Our mom attempted to interrupt. "This isn't the location." "That's right here," Gregory added. "Miss Rowena." Hartley's vote to immediately rescind Callista Winthrop's temporary engagement provision is approved by the board. The gavel actually dropped. The doors then opened. The press broke a levee as it poured in like floodwaters. Microphones, flashlights, inquiries, faces I didn't recognize were shouted. Words like power, move, family implosion, and silent partner are no longer mentioned. Callista shook and turned to face me. "Everything was damaged by you." I straightened myself in my outfit and gave her a direct gaze. "The day you decided you didn't need me, that's what you did." Gregory moved in between us as she rushed forward as if to say anything else. Nothing else can be said. I left. Heads turning, cameras flashing. They measured my steps. My face is unreadable. However, everything trembled within. Not out of fear, not even out of pride, due to the burden of finality. This was no victory. It was the truth, unquestionable, raw and past due. The previous evening, it had rained. The type of steady, leisurely rain that soaks everything in silence without demanding attention. The skies over the hills had cleared by Sunday afternoon, but the subtle aroma of eucalyptus and moist soil permeated the air. I let it in through the windows. There was stillness in the home, but it wasn't the eerie calm that follows a fight or a departure. This was not like the others. Not hefty, yet weighted, a silence merited. Grandpa's old study had been unaltered since the day I moved in. So I took my time moving past the foyer and into the rear corridor. I hadn't felt like redecorating it. There was still a hint of old paper and lemon oil. He left the shelves in their current state. His books were meticulously organized alphabetically. The gardening encyclopedias were still hidden within the magnifying glasses. I had left the envelope precisely where it was, the crack in the shade of the brass lamp on the corner of the writing desk immediately below it. This week, I had passed it each day. Occasionally, after picking it up, I would take a quick look at it before immediately putting it down again. However, I sat today. I inhaled, inserted my finger beneath the flap, and slowly opened it. There was only one photograph inside, slightly faded at the edges. It was me, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, sitting cross-legged among little pots of lilacs that were just beginning to bloom in my grandfather's greenhouse. My cheeks were stained with dirt. I grinned broadly, with one hand on my shoulder and the other carrying a watering can that was slightly flattened flat. He was squatting next to me. There was a dried but undamaged lilac flower below the picture, and underneath it was a message card written by him. Even if they never saw you, I would have recognized those tidy block letters anywhere. I always did. It took me a while to weep. First, I sat with it. Let it get ingrained in my bones. Let it speak into the void that could not be filled by headlines or boardroom votes. Eventually, though, the tears came, soft and relieved, but not heated or frenzied. I had been spotted. Not for who I married, not for what I could do, not because I didn't attend the party or provide the money. He saw me for who I am. As the sun started to dip westward, the light changed. I got up, cleaned my face, and carefully put the picture back in the package. After that, I grabbed my keys and left. It was a quick trip to my gallery. Stop signs and twisting streets for 15 minutes. I had owned the tiny little shop for 3 years. I didn't discuss it. Not with relatives, not with Callista, of course. However, it had developed in silence, like the plants that Grandpa used to care for steadily. The walls were still largely blank within. I brought something personal to the show tonight, which I hadn't hosted since last autumn. The central wall was my choice. The picture was displayed in a matte black frame with a little brass plate underneath in the one right across from the front window. Callista once made fun of me for using the sort, "People assume it's a thrift store when you hang things like that." She chuckled. "Make an effort to appear as though you belong in this world." I grinned as I stepped back. It read on the plate, "Legacy is not bestowed, it is earned." I was adjusting the frame when I heard a soft voice behind me. I turned to Miss Hartley. Erin, the summer intern I had hired months prior, was there. Her eyes were filled with interest, and she was holding a folder of flyers. "May I ask you a question?" I gave a nod. She glanced down, then back up again. "How did you make it through all of that?" I stared at her, thinking of the late hours, the therapy, the stillness, and all the ways I could respond to the attorneys. But my statement was straightforward. I said I stopped wondering why they didn't love me, and I began to love myself. Erin gave a hesitant nod before returning to the office to complete the print sorting. I continued to stand in front of the camera for a minute. When no one else had seen that photo, now hung where passers-by may see it. And not because I had anything to prove, but because I didn't. In the end, I didn't break them to win. Being louder, wealthier, or more ruthless didn't help me win. By refusing to become them, I prevailed.